And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tuesday's sea ice analysis here. Something of a change up here from yesterday. The two areas were separated here, eastern Arctic coast and then around the central Arctic coast. Those have merged now, so a little bit of an increase in the thin ice up there. And probably see day-to-day variations going on up here, but nothing too significant or drastic expected. And for the chart today, really not much in the way of any storminess going on. Got some areas of rain here over the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians for tonight. And spreading possibly up a few showers up into the southwest coast here, Togiak Bay, Dillingham maybe, and Togiak, or Cape Newenham. Warm front keeps it kind of damp up there over the northern Bering Sea. Front weakens, showers, areas of light rain on the decrease with this system there. And stays dry, light winds over the panhandle back across southern Alaska. This system tomorrow moves northeastward, brings wind and rain into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula throughout the day. This storm front kind of stays put up there, can't really go anywhere between the high to the north, so all that moisture is still streaming eastward here, but less of it than what there's been. Still a chance of rain there for the mid-Yukon River Valley areas on down toward the Delta. It becomes more scattered shower conditions to isolated. Mostly sunny here, partly mostly sunny south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, high 70s, 75. Same thing for the southeast coast, upper 60s to mid 70s for the highs, but except where there's low clouds and fog persisting along the coastline there. And then for the next day, Thursday, this low tracks northward there, 990 millibars, so some pretty good winds blowing around that. And rain moves into south central Alaska with a ridge here off to the east. Windy southeast winds, possibly gusting to 50 miles an hour in Turnagain Arm, and the mountain passes of the Chugach there with rain pushing in over toward Cordova. But Yakutat stays dry, the southeast coast stays dry, the north slope and the Arctic coast stay dry. And not too bad, just very isolated showers here for the Alaska Peninsula and mostly dry for the rest of the Aleutians. And for the coastal water forecast on the south coast tomorrow, light northwest winds, 10 knots. Central coast, northwest at 10. And the north coast, variable winds, 5 to 10 knots. And actually, variable winds at 10 knots for the inside waters with seas at 2 feet. And the outlook for Thursday, south coast, north winds 10 to 15 knots. Northwest at 10 on the central coast, variable 10 to 15 for the north coast. Lynn Canal, southeast winds at 10 knots for Thursday. Southwest at 10 for Stevens Passage. And Clarence Strait looking at northwest winds at about 10 knots with 2-foot seas. And for Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast for Wednesday, variable winds at 10 knots. Cook Inlet, same thing. Light variable winds, seas down to 2 feet. Southeast 15, Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands. And for the day Thursday, Cook Inlet, northeast winds 10 to 15 knots. Small craft advisories now for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, winds southeast 25 to 30 knots, seas 6 to 8 feet. Western North Gulf Coast, east winds at 15 knots. Eastern North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories, southeast at 25 knots, southeast at 20 for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, south winds tomorrow at 15 knots. Bristol Bay, small craft advisories, southeast 25 knots there. And Alaska Peninsula, east winds 20 to 25 knots, seas running 4 to 6 feet. And for Thursday, small craft advisories continue here for Bristol Bay, but seas only at 3 feet. South to southwest winds for the Alaska Peninsula at 25 knots, all the way up to Sitkinak Island. Kodiak Island, south to southwest, 20 to 25 knots. Western Aleutians tomorrow, variable winds, 10 to 15 knots, north to northeast at 15 for Adak and Atka. Eastern Aleutians, north to northeast winds at 20 to 25 knots. And for Thursday, Eastern Aleutians here, west-southwest, 20 to 25 knots, seas 6 to 9 feet. Light variable winds for Atka Island, light variable winds for Adak Island, all the way out to Amchitka, and from Kiska to Shimian, north winds 15 knots. Southwest coast tomorrow, northeast winds 10 to 15 knots, northeast at 20 with 4-foot seas for the Pribilofs, south 15 St. Matthew Island, and light southwest breeze 5 to 10 knots for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. They'll swing around to the northeast, picking up to 25 knots in Norton Sound. Seas building to 5 feet there. Otherwise, northeast winds 20 knots for the Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island. And southeast 30-knot winds now for the southwest coast. Northwest 25 knots for the Pribilof Islands. North 30 knots there for St. Matthew Island, with those seas up to 11 feet. And we've got gale warnings tomorrow for the central Arctic coast. West winds 35 knots, seas 11 feet. Small craft advisories for the western Arctic coast. West winds at 25 knots. Small craft advisories also for the east side there for west to southwest winds, 25 to 30 knots. 10 to 20 knot winds for the Chukchi Sea. And then much lighter winds in store for Thursday. West 5 to 10 knots there on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Central coast west at 10. Southwest 10 on the western coast. And 15 to 25 knot winds now for the Chukchi Sea out of the north, with seas running 3 to 6 feet.